Hi, hi all. I hope you're all keeping safe and well. Today I'm with my colleague Helen Woodland, who's the Director of Adult Social Care.
Hello everyone.
Great. So today Helen and I are going to try and talk to you about mental health in the way that you deal with different clients that you might have. So I'm going to ask Helen some questions and then she will answer, and hopefully through that you'll be able to get some insight. After this, if you have any other questions at all, either myself or Helen will be happy to answer them. So my first question, Helen, we have lots of people approach us as homeless, and when they do, sometimes they present with mental health issues, and housing staff on the front line don't know what to do with this very often. So, I would be very happy to hear what you think we should do, how we should approach it.
Okay, so I think it's important to be clear that we don't expect housing staff to be experts in mental health. And in the same way, we don't expect our social workers to be experts in mental health. So that is why the majority of people who've got quite severe mental health issues are supported by what we call our secondary mental health services. And that is our mental health trust, which in Brent is CNWL. So within CNWL, we have 54, I think, social workers who are specialists in mental health. And the people that they support are the ones who have really quite severe mental health issues. So I think the other thing to be clear about is mental health is a spectrum. So I hope that people went to the Forward Together sessions where Melanie Smith, Director of Public Health, did a really good session talking about the whole range of mental well-being, mental health and mental illness. And that's kind of a starting point. The other starting point, I think, is that everyone's individual. So I would love to be able to give my staff and your staff a list that goes, if people do this, this and this, and you tick it off, then this is the pathway they go down. Or if they present like this is what you do with them. And we're not ever going to be able to do that. So I suppose the other thing to be really clear about is what I think is most important is developing those relationships. So that if you're not an expert in mental health and you've got a case that you're not quite sure what to do with, you know who to talk to in adult social care. Because two brains are always better than one. And it's always going to be better to then have that relationship where you can have a conversation that says, I'm not quite sure what to do now, where do we go?
Okay, that's very helpful, Helen. Thank you very much. Now, on the other side of that, so we have tenants who either had mental health issues before they became our tenants, or developed mental health issues during the time that they've become our tenants. For example, you and I have discussed this case where my colleague poor Tsitsi, was chased by a snake. Set on her by one of our tenants, and this same tenant then took that snake out for a walk in the park. So when we have issues like this, how do you suggest housing officers deal with it?
Okay. So again, I think there's a whole range of different ways that people present, and there's a whole range of different issues. And one of the things that's really quite difficult, and actually our police colleagues really struggle with this, is there's also a distinction between being really crude about it, being mad, and being bad. So you can have a mental health issue and still behave really, really badly, and that's nothing to do with your mental health.
Okay.
So one of the things I think we have to be really careful about is making kind of a generalised statement that this person behaving in this way, or this antisocial way, is because of their mental health issue. So they might have a mental health issue, but actually their behaviour might be nothing whatsoever to do with that mental health issue. That's not everyone, so clearly I think we can all agree that if you're wanting to take your snake for a walk, that's not entirely sane. And that probably needs some kind of intervention. I think the other thing that I want to make really clear, Hickey, which is quite difficult, is there is no magic cure for people with quite severe mental health issues. So there isn't a pill we can give everyone that makes them behave the way that we want them to. There isn't a talking therapy that we can ask people to access that will mean that they behave in a way that we think is more suitable. some people are just going to behave badly.
Okay.
So again, that's a really difficult determination, and I think probably housing colleagues will need some support from our mental health service to be able to determine, is this behaviour because actually they have an untreated mental health issue, or is it that they've got an untreated mental health issue and they're still going to behave badly?
Okay.
And I think that's where relying on or making those links with mental health is really important, because we would never expect, I think, housing officers or even social workers in adult social care to make that determination on their own.
Okay.
I think the other thing that I would say is that we've got a range of people who, I think if you don't deal with mental health, you would look at and be quite shocked is the wrong word, but surprised by the level of severity of people's mental health issues that aren't treated within secondary mental health services.
Okay.
So if we go back to the points that Melanie Smith made, you've got your mental well-being, which all of us should be looking after. It's a bit like looking after your normal health, looking after your body. You've got people who've got probably quite severe mental health issues. There might be depression, might be even things like schizophrenia, but actually they're managed. So those conditions have been diagnosed, they've been treated, and that's usually by their GP. So that's in primary care. So it's only a really small percentage of people that ever hit the threshold for secondary mental health services.
Okay.
And that can be quite difficult about working out which is the best route of support, but also I think setting that expectation that there are quite a lot of mental health conditions that we absolutely would never claim we can cure. We might help people manage, but we can't cure them. So a lot of the time, I think the expectations need to change into how can we manage this behaviour better. So if I give you an example, another case that we've talked about, I think, a lot, we had a tenant in a particular block of flats that, for whatever reason, made the choice at 4 o'clock in the morning to strip naked and howl every morning. And I imagine if you live in that block of flats, that might get quite irritating.
Yes.
So we worked with our mental health colleagues to look at what his underlying mental health issues were. And actually, as an individual, he had a whole raft of things. So he had PTSD, he probably had some underlying schizophrenia, he was quite depressed, he had all sorts of things going on. So his GP, his primary care support, was able to help with kind of those mental health issues, but actually it was then about working really closely as a group, as mental health professionals and housing professionals, to say, this behaviour is never going to go away, so how can we manage it? One of the things that actually we came up with was that we don't really want him in a block of flats. So if he's going to behave in that way, one of the things that seemed to trigger him was he was permanently losing his keys. So actually we looked at a finger pad entry into a house that didn't have a shared hallway, and actually that mitigated a lot of the behaviours quite well. So I think sometimes it's a combination of things that we have to look at.
Okay, so that actually that's very good, because it's a good segue into my next question. How or when do we determine that someone is not fit to continue to be a tenant on their own? So for example, we have a range. We have people who are hoarders, and then we have people who behave in exactly the way you just described.
Yeah, so again, it's really difficult to give you a definitive answer because it's going to depend on the case. What I would say is, and I think probably housing colleagues know this as well as we do, that where you take a case where someone's behaving extremely badly to the courts to ask for an eviction, where judges see that they have a mental health issue, actually they're not always inclined to give us that eviction.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, these people have to live somewhere.
Yes.
So they may not need to live where they're currently living, but they have to live somewhere. And very, very few people will be supported in kind of secure mental health units. Only if you're very unwell are you going to be supported in a secure mental health unit, and that won't be for a long time. So they're treatment places, they're not places that people go to live. So I think that there's, as you say, a range of different issues. And I think, again, it's back to having that input from a number of different professionals to determine what's best for that individual. So in some cases, hoarding is a big issue. Hoarding comes up frequently across the council. And I would suggest that after COVID-19, we're going to see more of that. Because people who do have that issue, and it is a mental health issue, are going to be feeling more anxious, and they're going to be feeling more stressed. And one of the ways that stress kind of displays itself is that their hoarding increases.
I see.
So wherever possible, I think what we want to do is try and understand how capable that person is of living on their own, and what we need to do to support them long term. And you will know as well as I do that we have a number of people that we will do deep cleans and blitz cleans on flats 2-3 times a year.
That's right.
But actually, if that person, if we want to clean the flat out, if they are capable of looking after themselves, if they are safe, then the best place for them is still going to be that home. Because one of the really important things with hoarding is there is a mental and emotional connection to the things that they hoard. It's rubbish to you and me, you know, all the newspapers and genuine rubbish. It's not to that individual. It's important to that individual. So it has to be done in the right way, because if we go in and just clean it all out, actually that has an even worse impact on that person. And that can make their mental health worse, and it can make it harder for them to support them.
Okay. Now, my final question, Helen, and thanks for doing this, is the issue of suicide. We have applicants and tenants threatening to kill themselves, and you've spoken to me about this often. What is the right thing for staff to do when they come across such a threat?
So I think we need to be, we need to acknowledge that that's really distressing. So if you are an officer and you have someone in front of you saying that they feel like they want to kill themselves or they're going to kill themselves, there's also something about how we look after you as an individual, because that can be really distressing. The thing about suicide is it's not a social care issue, it's a health issue. Because if you think about it, my social workers, although very talented and very well qualified, are not medics. So they've got a degree in social work, they haven't got any right to hand out medication, they haven't got any medical know-how, they're not probably the right people to respond at that crisis point, because it is a crisis point. So suicide is a medical issue, and if you are immediately worried about someone, call an ambulance. Straight away, call an ambulance. If you think that someone probably actually doesn't need an ambulance, but you're still worried and they're making that threat, the best thing to do is to get them to see their GP.
Okay.
So what we would want is medical professionals to determine how serious that threat is and what kind of medical intervention we can put in place to support that.
Great. So that's it. Thank you very much, Helen. Really appreciate it. Like I said earlier, if you have any further questions about this, if you send those questions to me or Helen, or if you think that Helen should do even another video, then please do not hesitate to say. Thank you. Look after yourself, and bye for now.